I have been searching.
Welcome to Following the Fire, a podcast for Christians who are rethinking their faith and need a safe place to doubt. As we wander through the spiritual wilderness, we want to find and follow God wherever the pillar of fire leads.
And just like God's people in the Bible, we get lost, we miss the point, and we don't have all the answers. But maybe that's okay. We're on this journey together. I'm Nathan.
And I'm Steve.
But even on my heart can't compare with what you're worth.
Whew. How are you doing with all the... I feel like we're both going through a bunch of stress and changes. How's the...
Oh, yeah.
How's the new responsibility, new role?
That's mouth around a fire hose.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you feeling it?
Yeah, because we have... I was managing 2 software teams and a UX team, a small UX team. And so now I'm the director of software engineering and user experience. So I'm in charge of the same team as before, but now I'm going to hire a manager to take over that team. I still manage the UX team, and I'm directly managing our firmware team, or embedded software, which is like 6 more people and 1 guy in Australia. And so it's sucked up a lot. Like my calendar, which I thought was busy enough, exploded like overnight. So yeah, I'm very busy, but it's like a good busy. I thrive on not knowing stuff, or maybe that's not the way to put it. I thrive on challenges, I guess, and not being able to just figure it out easily, which is...
And it sounds like jumping in, it sounds like you probably like once you've gotten to know a certain thing well enough, it's actually more fun to not know a thing so that you can jump into it and learn it.
Oh yeah. And there's always improvements that can be made wherever in whatever you're doing, but after a while you can know what's going to happen next, and then there's no twist ending, right? And then who needs M. Night Shyamalan? Is that Shyamalan?
Shyamalan. I have never been able to say that correctly. And
Shyamalan.
It's probably really easy to say correctly. Shyamalan? No, that was worse. Yeah.
I really liked it. I really liked The Sixth Sense. Everything after that, I was like, could be better.
There are some surprises by Shyamalan?
Shyamalan.
There was something recently that I ended up liking. I mean, I love Signs.
Mm-hmm.
That's Shyamalan.
I have issues with Signs, but no spoilers.
I really liked Unbreakable.
Yeah, that was good. Yeah,
that's all I got.
I was not a fan of The Village.
I don't think I've ever seen that in chronological order, but I worked in a movie theater when that was out, so I've seen snippets. And it wasn't worth the free movie passes to go see it for me. Why does this not have... Oh, director. And then I haven't seen most of the rest. I think he kind of became known as the twist ending person, and you can't... That's too predictable.
Yeah, kinda.
After a certain, if you're just gonna go see, hey, this is the guy that always does a twist movie twist at the end of the movie.
No, I have been watching the show on Apple TV Plus called Servant.
Okay.
And it's at least, I think it's based on his idea. I'm not sure if he's a producer, director, or whatever.
Executive producer. Yep.
But it's been pretty good.
And director for some of the episodes. Okay. Servant.
Yeah. I mean, if you like creepy, scary, it's a bit kind of horror-ish.
I don't.
Genre.
Heather does. I do not.
Yeah, I've been on a horror movie television show kick lately. I don't know why. Probably something psychology.
Yeah, I feel like I've only wanted to see light comedies since about March of 2020 for some reason. So.
Yeah, maybe it's, I don't know. Maybe it's that with the weird feeling of, well, at least I have it better than them. I didn't get possessed by a demon.
Could be worse.
Could be worse.
It could be. Things are actually pretty good for a lot of people.
Some surprising spiritual themes and stuff. Kind of thinking back to the episode about deconstruction in popular media,
Yeah, Signs is a deconstruct. Oh man, I gotta rewatch Signs.
Oh, that's right.
He's a deconstructed. I mean, he's a pastor who loses faith because of Trump. Because of loss. Interesting.
Oh yeah, somebody on the Facebook group mentioned how, like, isn't all this deconstruction stuff in the reason, or he said the reason there's so much deconstruction stuff in movies and TV is that it's just basically growth.
It's a character arc.
Right. It's a classic character arc of person. It's like, have you ever looked into or heard of the like stuff about Pixar and how they got to be popular? They had this, like, the Pixar formula for storytelling. It was like, they summed it up in a couple sentences, like, every day this happens, with the main character, until, something big happens. Mm-hmm. And then this, then this, then this, then this, and then I forget all the details. People can Google it and look it up. But basically, every single Pixar story starts with the, like, status quo, everything's fine, and then something triggers something happens. Nemo gets taken by the diver, and then that throws everything up in the air. Everything changes. Person goes on a growth journey, and at the end, everything's different, but it's better.
Huh.
And it's pretty much every single Pixar movie that's gone well is that exact same arc, which is kind of what, I mean, we're all hoping for, that at the end of this, we're going to be in a better place, whatever that looks like, right?
That's so interesting, and it makes sense that just a good story is about people getting new perspective, new experience, or having to stretch beyond what they were doing before.
Yep.
And I think deconstruction is such a nebulous thing, but for a lot of us, it's definitely just another word for growth or change. So that makes a lot of sense.
Here it is. Here's the formula: 8 steps, and you too can have a internationally, world-renowned movie. So once upon a time there was, every day, then one day, because of that, until finally, and ever since then. So those are like the 8 prompts for if you can't break your story down into those things, just 8 simple sentences, then the story's too complex for kids or people, really. Kids are people too.
Great.
Yeah, it's good.
I'm gonna have to try out some personal storytelling with that formula.
Yeah, okay. That's good. Yeah. So, anything new for you lately?
I got a rock tumbler.
What?
Yeah, it's like a classic,
like make them smooth and give shiny,
like a 10-year-old. But I pick up interesting looking tiny little rocks, pocket-sized pebbles, everywhere I go.
Yeah.
Because here's my theory. So I like the little details along the way. Hiking, I'm usually looking at the mica or the little lichen, and not necessarily at the vista. And I think it's because I'm short-sighted and flat-footed. So I like to hike, but I can't, I don't see that well. And I'm flat-footed, so I have to constantly look down as I'm going anywhere. Or else I'll fall over.
Yeah.
So anyways, I the whole time I'm like, ooh, cool little rocks. And so for a few months I've been thinking, man, what if I maybe I could tumble them and maybe they would look cool. So again, I'm pretty sure here's the story arc of a tumbler. So once upon a time, there was a kid that just had a bunch of plain old rocks. Until he saw these cool shiny rocks at the store and learned that you can just buy a tumbler and get these. And so he gets this thing, he plugs it in, and then I think 100% of people who buy a rock tumbler probably use the kit that comes with it because it comes with some pre-made rocks. And it's like, oh yeah, okay, I guess I know what was going to happen at the end of that. You get a little bit smoother rocks, and then that's the end. It probably never gets used again after that time.
Yeah, probably.
So we'll see. I'll keep you posted. It's like a month-long process. So
yeah, I when I did my semester in Vienna, we did, we had like a Eurail pass. We can go all over the place. For a while there, I tried to get a stone or a cobblestone or something from every country we went to, like the little tiny cobblestones, like maybe like an inch and a half across.
I was like, cobblestones are huge.
Yeah, like little tiny ones, that you get in like Prague or whatever. And so I have a bunch of those in the basement someplace.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, something interesting about, I don't know if you call it spiritual or what, but like dirt from the place you were. It's just dirt, right? Or a rock or whatever. It's like kind of like you're there still, something.
That's definitely what I take them from meaningful places.
Yeah.
To retain a connection to that place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like my mind is not good it's like, instead of just remembering this and making an actual connection, I have to grab a thing and bring it back with me.
Yeah, it's better than paying like $50 for somebody else to pick it up for you.
I was going to say, I don't know any of the rules for when are you allowed or not allowed to take things from...
Probably never, from
places.
Like Interpol probably shouldn't be listening to this podcast right now. But
right.
It made me think of that story in the Old Testament. I forget the dude's name. He was not an Israelite, but he's the guy who had leprosy and he like bathed 7 times in the water.
Naaman?
Is that Naaman? Is that his name? Yeah. And he actually wanted to worship the God of Israel. And so he took a box of dirt from Israel so he could continue to worship the God of Israel.
Oh, interesting.
In his home country of Assyria or wherever it was. That's really interesting. It's like Yahweh could only be the God when that dirt was around or something.
Right.
In his mind anyway.
Like an embassy that's like the ground below it belongs to the United States or something.
Yeah. Which made me then think of the Bram Stoker's Dracula, when at the very, very beginning of the movie, no spoilers, Dracula is actually being transported across countries in dirt from Transylvania. He's like sleeping in the dirt, and it had to be from there, so he had to maintain his magical powers or something. I forget. I mean, it's probably a big leap from Dracula or from Naaman to Dracula. But I digress.
This world is not my home. I'm just a passing.
So I asked on the Following the Fire Facebook discussion group a few days ago that we were going to be recording a Q&A episode, or we can call it Q&A or Q&R, Nathan.
We mostly do have responses and not so much answers. But
yeah, Q and maybe some answers, but definitely responses. But that's
it's like prompt and talking.
Q and R probably sums it up better. But
yeah,
Q&A, Q&R, whatever you want. Anyway, so I said, hey, what questions do you have? Do you like any topic, whatever? And we got some really good questions, some really tough ones, some that are so deep and complex that we probably are going to just give short answers to, because anything more would be like not fair. But so we'll see how it goes. And so I had a crazy day at work, and so we got all the questions together. But Nathan, you kind of went comb through and we picked ones you kind of wanted to discuss. So I'll shoot it to you and let you start. We'll talk about some of these.
Yes. And just like any excuse to talk, I like all of them. So thank you for submitting these. I think if I keep us disciplined and moving, we can probably hit all of the questions with some kind of a response. But I want to try to group these a little bit with just some talk about deconstruction, because that comes up so often in the group, comes up a lot in our discussions and with our guests. So the first one was, what's the goal of deconstructing? And some of these questions, by the way, in the group, because it's a discussion group, a lot of people responded to. So really, for the A part, just go to the group and read those answers. We're not necessarily going to do better than that. I tend to disagree with questions like this because I disagree with the premise.
What do you mean?
Well, I think obviously the goal is going to depend on your point of view, or kind of what you mean by deconstruction and what you mean by goal. So not to deconstruct.
The question implies that there's one goal.
Yeah, and right? I think some people kind of want to know that answer a little bit more tangibly. Like, well, where's the finish line of this? Or what are your intentions with my deconstruction?
Yeah.
And I would say that an easier question to answer would be something like, well, what should the church's role be in deconstruction? What should the goal be of a pastor if you are helping someone that is deconstructing in your congregation? That's kind of you've now framed it into perspective and that kind of thing. Or what should the role of friends be during deconstruction? I've got a buddy who's deconstructing. Kind of what should I be, what should my goal be there? And I guess for me, it's kind of because it's like, I think of deconstruction a little bit more like grief. Like you don't start grieving on purpose. You don't start grieving because you have a goal. You start grieving because you have a loss. You experience some kind of a trauma or a sad event. And then it's a
really good analogy, I gotta say. Have you brought that up before?
I don't know.
I like that analogy a lot. That really explains a lot.
You probably brought it up. But it very much like is a thing that happens to a lot of people more than they choose to do. And just like grief, someone who's in grief is going to ask this question, like, what is where am I going here? But the goal of grief is not to stop.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal of grief is also not to get better. I mean, if there is a goal, but it's really, how can you be healthy when you grieve? What is grief? What is grief doing? Is there a purpose to it? Is it going to get better? Because I think what you want is to fully grieve, to grieve healthily. You're going to come back to it sometimes to revisit. So I definitely see deconstruction in that light. And if the goal is to do it healthily, I would say that's a good goal, but that's kind of evading the question.
Yeah, when I first saw it, I'm glad you put it that way. It's like something that happens to you and it's just a process. And honestly, in some ways with grief, there are some aspects of grief that may never go away.
Yep.
You know? And honestly, as sort of traumatic and just difficult as this whole process has been, and continues to be sometimes, I don't think I want to find myself in a place where I'm just not really thinking about what's going on. I mean, not that if you're not just, I'm not saying that if you're not deconstructing, you're not thinking about it, but I feel like I, along with probably a lot of people listening to this, have at least in their lives, they probably have been in the place of just kind of accepting the way things have been in a lot of ways, not even thinking about a possible difference, like that this could change. And so when I first thought about the answer to this question, I actually thought about the goal being a process, like the goal being not, I want to end up in this position, this place or this location, but more of the goal is to dismantle the things that don't matter or the things that harm. And so I guess in some ways you might say that you end up with only the good stuff, but I don't know. I like your answer better. It's not so much a thing that you do, but it's a thing that kind of happens to you and you kind of go along for the ride and try to do your best along the way.
Yeah. And I do think there is something to like deconstruction in the sense that you decide to take something apart all the way to the fundamental elements and then reconstruct it or examine it and understand it. That's kind of a different, I think I'm pretty loose in what I even use, what I mean when I say deconstructing. So in that sense, the goal of deconstruction is to understand something better than you did before, like you said, so that can be a very real, tangible goal.
Yeah.
And then I would say that you'd almost want to be able to reconstruct it and see the whole and the individual parts that you've now taken apart. So you don't want to get so disconnected that you can't kind of see both of those things in perspective. The whole system that you were looking at, and also the individual broken or not broken parts of it that kind of make it up. I do think that's kind of more the deconstruction philosophy part of it. That seems like a cyclical thing to me, but I think again, my perspective was more of the emotional kind of deconstruction than maybe a logical one.
Yeah. And it's hard to take those apart. Try as you might, there's always a lot more emotion tied up in logic than we think. We like to think we're super logical, but we're not.
Definitely. And there's a couple of questions that were very much up this. So one is, what's the focal point of deconstruction? What are the goals of it? How do you know if it's time to stop and shift to the rebuilding part of it? And are we ever finished?
Well, kind of like I said, I hope I'm not finished in some ways, because I guess in some ways I've always felt that we should deconstruct ourselves a little bit before I had a term for that. Being brought up with Paul's words ringing through my ears, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. That's kind of what I feel like I'm doing. And so I hope that I always continue to do that. And so, like, the focal point to that question, it's kind of in the name of our podcast, I think, in my mind. Like, I solidly believe in God. I'm kind of wondering what that means in some ways now. Back when before I thought I had it all figured out, but maybe I didn't. So, but I do know that that's the focal point, is I want to follow God wherever that goes, and hope I'm going to keep following.
That leads very cleanly into the next set of questions. So these are about the role of God in people's deconstruction or in this movement of people. So one is what role does the Holy Spirit, also, or the Spirit of God, or the mind of Christ play in deconstruction and reconstruction? And how do you see God's involvement in the deconstruction happening in American evangelicalism? Is this a move by God or man or both? And what roles do we all play?
I'm gonna let you take that one because you know everything about the Holy Spirit, so
There we go.
I mean, it's not a complicated subject or anything.
Yeah, just, I'll tell you, I have all of the magical insights, just me, from doing some numerology in my spare time.
Right.
So movement by God in general is a thing that I have severely underestimated in my Christian upbringing. In my worldview believes in God, but doesn't really think a whole lot about God actually doing the things that God says he's doing.
Yeah.
And I think I focused on things like, certain person became president, maybe God did or didn't want that, or God wants me to marry this person, right? Kind of limited to that.
Yeah.
And increasingly, I'm seeing that healthy churches are the churches who believe that they don't do any of this stuff and that it's all up to God, and that they're kind of trying to move the same direction as God and not against God, as opposed to stuff that they're doing all on their own. So I have a personal journey where I've been, maybe in the last couple of years, trying to move more towards trusting that God does move and is moving, and that I don't have to necessarily do so much of it myself. And as a result, I've started to focus on some of those things, like, is God moving? How is God moving? Or what would God be doing through this?
Yeah.
And I absolutely see God working through what's happening in American evangelicalism, what's happening in individual, just believers' journeys. And I probably, if I didn't believe that there was something that God was doing or could do from this, I wouldn't be on the show talking about it all the time.
Yeah.
Is God working to restore and improve the American church? I don't think so. Why don't you think so? I haven't seen churches or institutions really reacting to this as much as I have seen individuals reacting to this. And I think that
good point.
We are a lot more concerned about the institutions than God is, especially the American ones. Like the American church in 2020. I think I think God is working to help Christians separate their culture from their calling in America right now. I've seen a lot of that. Or I should step back and say, what is my framework for even making these evaluations and saying where God is and isn't? And I guess what I mean by this is, where am I seeing the fruit of the Spirit, like, in people's lives, in what direction? And so maybe a gross generalization would be that the reaction I have seen from churches have not been full of the fruit of the Spirit in my experience. But the reactions that I've seen from Christians who are deconstructing have, in the people that I know or the people we've spoken to, have ended up with these changes that I think demonstrate fruit of the Spirit and movement by God. And I think that this is a moment for Christians to focus on hurting people and other people and outside people. And I think that whenever that happens, that is God moving, because that is what God's priority is. And personally, I try to pray the Lord's Prayer every day. So in the framework of that kind of meditation, I have experienced that daily sustenance, that daily bread, and I think I have seen it for people who are working through this kind of thing. And we have all of this deconstructing language in the Bible, by the way, of like God is near the brokenhearted, or the crushed in spirit, right? Or blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. They inherit the kingdom. That's a crazy paradox. And I think that I have seen this happening in the last few years, that the people who think they're being thrown out of the wedding party are actually the ones that are invited.
Yeah.
And then, like anything, I think there's still temptation and danger that we're gonna just turn into, I don't know, the hating our enemies and loving our friends, just like any kind of movement or group. But I think that God is involved in what is happening in American evangelicalism because of the increase in love that I've seen in people who kind of follow down that path, even though it's a path full of grief and pain.
You have triggered a lot of thoughts in my head about this one. So, like, as far as the role of God and the Spirit and etc. in this whole process, if I feel like I'm, it's so. I mean, it's all a guess, right? It's so subjective. Because if I think that I'm doing the right thing, then then Spirit of God's totally with me and prompting me to do these things, prompting me to look at things differently and reevaluate. Well, okay, then why isn't the Spirit of God doing those things with everybody? You know, and not that the Spirit has to do the same thing with everybody. But then you said something about, like, if wherever these good things are happening, that's evidence that the Spirit's involved because they're good things. And I started thinking about the whole. See, the problem here is some of these questions, like this question, almost requires you to not be in the middle of deconstruction in order to give a decent answer. Because I keep like every single sentence I say, I'm like, well, what? Maybe if it's not though, you know, because you say that, and I started thinking, well, if something good is happening, and if God is the Father of all good things, then what do you do with the people who are of another religion or no religion at all who are doing good things? Is God working through them? Then does that mean he approves of them or whatever? I don't know.
Yeah.
So many questions.
There's a Bizarro Following the Fire podcast happening at the same moment where the answer is the Spirit working through this deconstruction, and where the two people say, oh yeah, the Lord is purifying the church. The people who weren't true believers to begin with are falling away and following their heart's desires. Right. So, my claim is not, I don't mean to be sharing as strong a certainty as it probably sounds like I'm saying. But from my relational experience, I would say that there has been more light than dark and more growth than decay in the people who are going through this difficult time and feel outcast and that kind of thing. And then it's my belief that those are the kinds of things that the kingdom of God is like. That's what kind of a kingdom it is. Is a kingdom for those kinds of people. But that's me making the leap that, man, I think the Spirit is the kind of thing that is for the broken people, and that the kingdom is the kind of place that is for the black sheep on the outside. And when I draw the line around that kingdom, I have seen the growth happen in those communities. But yeah, again, I don't actually know.
Yeah, and I mean, anytime you ask, like, what is God doing, or why is God doing the fill in the blank, you're probably wrong on something.
Definitely.
I mean, and then that gets dangerously into, and I'm not saying this question is implying this at all, but it gets into the creating God in your own image problem. Because you think, well, I would never do that, or I would never think that way. Therefore, God wouldn't, and therefore this is what God is wanting to do.
Yeah.
And then there's also the presumption that things that you want to happen are God's way of approving of you or not, if they're bad things that have happened to you.
Totally. There was a bumper sticker in front of me in traffic today. I can't remember exactly what it said, but it was like, have you considered that you might be wrong about everything? or like, have you considered that you might be on the totally wrong side?
Do I have a podcast for you?
Yeah, I think that's it's a great bumper sticker because that's just anyone who reads it's going to be like, well, gosh, maybe, because that's what I did. I was like, yeah, I could totally be on the wrong side of this whole thing for sure.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting exercise to have, that's the kind of thing a politician would never be allowed to answer on the record. Hey, have you considered that you might be wrong about this issue? Yeah, I might be wrong, but we're going to go with our gut on this,
oh boy, yes. That's a great question to ask at any time,
Good bumper sticker. And I really mean it as like, you don't just show it to people who are wrong. You got to ask yourself that question occasionally.
Yeah, it kind of makes me think of, I've been in engineering land all week, and that's not a theme park. It's just, work.
Every theme park is engineering land.
I was going to say, that would be a pretty cool theme park, but you're right.
Yeah.
Anyway.
The ones that aren't get like just bulldozed by lawsuits pretty quickly.
So I've been in engineering land all week, and in software, there's often bugs that pop up, or even hardware stuff. There's things that don't work out. The drop test breaks the thing and it doesn't work, or the software doesn't do what's expected. So you go together and you say, okay, we got a problem, we got to fix this problem, or we got to change the way this thing behaves. And so you tend to get into like this mode of you like do a fishbone diagram and all these things to figure out the problems and the root cause and all this kind of stuff. But I find it's always so very helpful to when you figure out this big giant solution to the problem to say, what would happen if we did nothing? like what if we don't fix this bug? What if it breaks when it drops? What's going to happen? And it's kind of the same. It's kind of asking that question, like, what if everything you thought is wrong? What if you're on the wrong side of everything? And it's if nothing else, it's a good level set for, what if nothing is done and you don't change, what's your life going to look like? Or if you do change, what's your life going to look like? And that's kind of the kind of introspection that's so easy to not do. And as I kind of hinted at earlier, it's kind of an introspection I hadn't done in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think partially is I kept myself so stinking busy all the time, I didn't have time to think about it.
Yeah.
And the times that I had quiet time with God or whatever, reading my Bible or praying, I entered into it with all kinds of presuppositions and barriers of areas that I'm not allowed to ask the question, what if I do nothing? Or what if I turn it upside down? So, I don't know, maybe that's the goal of deconstruction. Maybe that's what God's doing. Asking us to ask ourselves, what if you're on the wrong side of things?
I also feel like I can be guilty of either oversimplifying or just putting my own experience on a very diverse and non-uniform scattering of experiences.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to be mindful too of the people for whom deconstruction was extremely damaging and painful, and that they are not feeling like they're in a better place, or like not like, God was taking care of them, but kind of the opposite. And so I don't want oversimplify too much, because I think there's definitely that as well, and we have to encompass that in our in kind of the view to keep keep from simplifying out the ugly bits. But I do believe that, like, deconstruction or this growth and change and challenging, I think that if we look at it from a Christian perspective, that we very much see the Spirit leading people through this kind of thing in the Bible a lot. Kind of the whole New Testament, but my favorite example is Peter and Cornelius, where it's explicitly Spirit-led deconstruction that ends with Peter kind of accepting an unbiblical and un-Jewish and blasphemous idea that he can eat with a Gentile, and that he can accept a Gentile into this sect of Judaism that he is kind of a leader of. And so I think what we learn from that is that sometimes it's this big challenging thing, but there's a direction that is consistent, which is that it is towards loving people and towards even meeting people where they are. And I think that that's a good, I think that Jesus, the Jesus deconstruction movement, where he says, "You have heard it taught, but I tell you," we see Jesus hitting people with the logos, pathos, and ethos kind of revamp, where he has the words of, "You know this, but I tell you this." He challenges people to change who they're hanging out with and who they're eating with, and even who they aspire to be. Who do you look up to? And then the authority, who has spiritual status in our community. Jesus came in and turned all of those upside down, and if that's not deconstruction, then I don't know what is.
Jesus, the original deconstructionist.
Yes.
Somewhere beyond the blue, the angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord.
Which, speaking of, one question was, isn't deconstructing exactly what Martin Luther and Stone and Campbell were doing?
You know, I almost immediately responded with, yes, absolutely. But I'm not sure. I mean, so in some ways, yes, absolutely. They were rethinking, in as much as they were rethinking things, and they were trying to get rid of some of the cruft and detritus that was on the crust of the Christianity at the time. But Martin Luther and Stone and Campbell. So Martin Luther, the Reformation, and the Stone Campbell movement was the Restoration, as the terminology goes. They kind of were doing different things.
Yeah.
From each other, for one.
Yeah.
So Martin Luther was a Catholic priest, and he just wanted to reform the Catholic Church. He didn't want to start something new. He didn't want to break off. That's why the theses were, well, that's why it's called the Reformation, right? So he wanted to reform it. And so these 95 theses he nailed on the wall and were on the door were ways that he thought that the Catholic Church had gone away from Scripture and what they needed to do to fix it. And very comprehensive list. But he ended up leading a revolution, basically. And Stone and Campbell were based Methodists and Baptists. And they, what they wanted to do is go back to the Bible only. So it's similar. And they wanted to start a new thing. And with the goal of restoring back to the first century church, which Martin Luther had no interest in at all, because that's just not, Catholic Church was an evolving thing. And so they never really wanted to go back to the first century because they were fine as it was in their mind. So, I'm getting in the weeds a little bit, but I feel like what's going on now, what we are calling "quote unquote" deconstruction in 2022, is almost a movement outside of church completely. A lot of people going through this process, one of their first steps is to realize where they are going to church is not going to work anymore for whatever reason. And so whereas the previous two guys, or three people, two movements, were trying to fix something, folks going through this now seem to tend to be like, let's just toss it all in the garbage and start over and figure out what's really core and go from there. And for a lot of people, that includes the Bible. It includes a lot of fundamental beliefs that the previous folks mentioned would never have even thought of deconstructing. But I think, so all of that, all those weasel words, as Wikipedia would call them, to say that it's the same, I think it's the same heart. Something's wrong and with my faith, and it needs to be fixed. Mm-hmm. I think the path is different and the motivations are different in some ways. But I think a lot of that is, as I'm talking, I'm thinking a lot of that may have to do just with the fact that technology is different now. I mean, if the internet was around when Martin Luther was around, it maybe looked exactly like it looks now. Because this, right. We cannot discount how big of a factor that is in this whole process.
Yeah, I definitely think that the start of those movements have certainly some similarities to what people have today. Maybe more so Martin Luther than Stone Campbell. We have veered off from what I think the truth is, or something like that.
Yeah.
But I personally would certainly think that it was a failure and very ironic if this turned into a new movement, you know? Like, so for me, Stone Campbell turned into the Churches of Christ and other denominations. And it would be kind of ironic if folks who are going through deconstruction then, start the deconstructed church. Because I personally don't think it's kind of a movement, and I would retroactively blame Stone and Campbell for this, or accuse them of this, even though I'm ignorant to how they actually were. But when you move from certainty to certainty, when you move from, whatever they were before to then now we have all the correct answers, I feel like you have grown zero.
Yep.
And so I think a better movement would be one that starts with certainty and ends with that harmony, complexity kind of feeling, so that maybe the people who stay Christian after they deconstruct, maybe they can actually integrate back into their church that they grew up in, or maybe they can integrate back into another tradition, but not that they just went back to kind of the certainty beliefs of that group, but they just found the way that they can have that community and hold it humbly, without making the institution more of their identity than the God that they're trying to worship. I would also add Joseph Smith to that list, because I feel like Stone Campbell and Joseph Smith had a very similar story. And Joseph Smith's story was, all of the churches are doing it wrong. How can I get it right? And then he had the one unique truth, and now we have Mormonism. Yeah. And I think that speaks to the danger of the secret, absolute, one and only truth that I alone have discovered.
I mean, I don't know if we have any Mormon listeners, but sorry if I'm about to offend you if you are listening as a Mormon. I think that Joseph Smith's situation is different in that I think the guy, I think he was a con man. I think he was doing it to get power and money. That's just based on the evidence of the rest of his life, but that's a whole other thing.
Yeah. I would definitely say I like Joseph Smith as a person a lot less than Misters Stone and Campbell. But they ended up starting movements that became very, 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 very similar.
I think almost any movement's going to become that way if part of that movement is we've got it figured out and you don't.
The one and only truth. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. So did we answer the question? Yeah,
I don't know.
Maybe,
Sure.
maybe that's deconstructing. I like to answer the question too. Like, I wonder what could have happened if the Catholic Church responded differently to Martin Luther.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a story that that could happen?
Fewer people would have died. That's for sure.
Right. Yeah. Or even in Stone Campbell, which was, by the way, a little pebble in the lake of Christianity, but a unity movement of the church could have certainly ended up with maybe more unifying members, right, than the very much not unified church that somehow spawned out of it. And I think that we are always have those opportunities to respond differently to our enemies, or to choose love, not violence, intellectually, however that means. And so we can be both Martin Luther nailing the thesis on the wall, but we can also be the institution taking offense to those ideas. And I think we have some agency to figure out like what it is going to look like this decade and this.
Actually, that makes me think of another difference between those two movements and what I see happening now. Both the Stone Campbell movement and Martin Luther had the mindset of something's going wrong. We need more rules. You're not following the rules. You're not doing it right. Whereas what I see a lot now is that people say, this isn't right, something's going wrong. And it's like stepping away from the rules, stepping away from the feeling that you have to be right, quote unquote. And so it's almost like instead of a movement toward tighter restrictions and more conservatism, it's a move away from those restrictions and a loosening of the grip.
Yes. Yeah, I like that a lot. And then how do you keep it that way though, without starting to form cultural rules around?
Yeah, I mean, I've already come across like Facebook groups and websites of people who they're calling themselves deconstruction experts and deconstruction coaches. Yeah. And here's how you want to know how to deconstruct? Sign up for my email list and they'll give you a guide, Yeah. And then I'll put you through a sales funnel and hopefully you'll buy my book.
Right.
Of how to do it the right way. And I've even heard within the deconstruction community on TikTok of these people, like there are groups of people in that world on there that are very open and open-minded and free thinking, etc. But then there are people who are kind of critical of that and saying, well, you're doing it wrong. And then people will say, quit telling me I'm doing it wrong. I'm deconstructing, And so and there are people who are trying to set up boundaries and like hierarchies of it's just like human nature almost to pull it back into if it's not in a box, I'm going to make a box for it and stick it in there. And so to answer your question, how do you keep it that way? I don't know. Other than just making it a habit to think differently. And maybe you do that by purposely reading books that disagree with you or make you uncomfortable. Like at least one a year is probably enough to, if you purposely do that. But if it's just the opposite of a lot of the anti-racist stuff, honestly, is kind of a way to approach this as far as actively and purposely retraining your brain to think of things in a different way, because whether you know it or not, or realize it or not, your brain is in a rut that has been put there because you're 30, 40, whatever years old, and it's never had a chance to get out of that rut.
No friend like you. heaven's not my home, then Lord, what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore.
Well, we have not given as many responses as there were questions asked. And like I like to do, I saved many of the best for last, and we are running out of time. So
I thought those were good questions. Yeah,
they were possibly the best ones.
no, I mean the ones we asked already were good.
Oh, they're all my favorites. All are equally my favorite.
You love all your children.
Yeah. But the ones that I didn't ask were my more favorite.
Oh.
But into patriarchy and matriarchy and the Bible, institutional racism coming up. What else? And then just a lot more doubt and Christianity and deconstruction and how to do it the right way in 10 easy steps. So, thanks again so much for submitting questions. I hope that you enjoyed this interaction between the group and the podcast, and very happy to hear your responses to our responses.
Yeah. And if you haven't joined the group, obviously we keep talking about it. So, feel free to join the group. Maybe send us a gift to make sure that you get accepted. I don't know,
Yeah, I feel like anytime I see someone that I don't know who they are and they look suspicious, I just ignore it and hope that you make the decision. Because but if you have been rejected from the group, you should ask again. I think I said that last time.
Yeah, like there's one person that I kept rejecting and you kept, you're like, Steve, this is a real person.
This is a real person. You need to stop it just because their name sounds funny. Some people make up fake Facebook accounts that are obviously fake. And then some people just look like obvious fake people. It's like, really? Your name is, Sally Buttersquatch, and it's like, yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. And some exciting news. New music release, a drop. That's what you call it.
New drop
coming out. So if you want to get with the drop, Daniel Wheat releasing a new song on March 25th, which is maybe today if you're
February
late listening
25th.
to our show.
February 25th.
Did I say March? I meant February 25th. It's been a long pandemic, folks. Okay, February 25th. New song coming out. You can find Daniel on all the things: Spotify, Apple Music. Can you use? I have technology questions for later. And the song is "This World Is Not My Home." It's a retake on the classic that you all love and know, and he made it better.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I've heard it. Yeah, so download it, listen to it, whatever. Do the things with it, like it.
Yeah, you can follow, like, all of these things. There are computers looking at those responses and deciding if that computer should recommend these artists or this podcast to other people. So do all the things: share, like, subscribe, download. Daniel puts a lot of work into these, really sharing his heart, and there are almost always stories or messages behind the songs that you are going to connect with. He's a deep feeler, thinker, human, and so and also his idea. He came up with the idea for our shared Spotify music list that I listen to all the time now.
Oh yeah, it's a great list.
And Daniel's been working quite a lot, so there's a lot more coming after this, I'm sure. So take a listen and tell your friends.
Cool. Well, looking forward to the next Q and either R or A. And one, I also don't want to forget the next book club book That's coming up in a couple episodes. Is going to be Heavy Burdens.
Heavy Burdens. Yep.
By Bridget Eileen Rivera. So grab your copy. Subtitle once again is 7 Ways LGBTQ Christians Experience Harm in the Church. So grab that. Links on the website and in the show notes. And that'll be on March 9th. So join us for that. Wait. Yeah.
All right.
Well, stay warm with the snow. And it just snowed tonight and iced on my car earlier today. So,
like Oklahoma.
Yeah, it's weird. I had to scrape my window.
I have an engineer friend. I have like 100 stories that prove that engineers aren't as smart as people think they are. But an engineer friend from Colorado went through a good old-fashioned Oklahoma ice storm and used a hammer to try to break the ice on his windshield to predictable results. So
I did have to chip my way into my car when I was a sophomore, I think, at Oklahoma. Like I had heard about the ice storms and didn't believe it. I was going to work and there was literally like a quarter inch of ice on every part of my car.
Yeah,
and I had to go back into my dorm room and get a screwdriver to chisel my way in. Couldn't believe it.
Yeah, those storms are intense. I don't think Oklahomans even know how intense those storms are.
No.
I think that they assume that what we go through in Colorado is much worse, but those ice storms are crazy.
Yeah.
Give
me a Colorado winter at any time.
Yeah, but now we're getting the ice storms, so it's fair, I guess.
Nothing to worry about there.
Okay.
I'll see you later, man.
See ya. Take care.
But it only takes a whisper.
Hey, thanks for listening. We hope you got something out of the episode today. Check the show notes in your podcast app for all the links and references that were made, or you can find it all at followingthefire.com. If you'd like to support the show, please go to patreon.com/followingthefire to become a patron. And of course, we'd love it if you rate the podcast and share it with others. See you later.